So thank you everyone for tuning in today. This is very exciting. I'm here with Julie Freed, who is a event producer. I won't say too much, Julie, so why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and yourself?
Okay, great. So I have been in the event industry for 13 and a half or so years, producing a wide range of events. So everything from nonprofit events to corporate to social and weddings and almost anything in between. I live in downtown Boston. This is where my company is based, Freed Events, and I live with my husband and my two children that are 1 and 3 years old.
Must be a busy household.
Oh, yeah.
Great. So if you could give us a little bit of background on what sort of work you've done with nonprofit event planning.
So I've probably produced about 50 to 70 nonprofit events, and they range from high-end galas to what I would call a cultivation event, where it could be a dinner or cocktail reception, where it's really about the organization making new contacts and getting the right people in the room and to hear the message. And, even some smaller, receptions, board meetings, seminars, and a whole real range.
Would you say that arranging events for nonprofits is different to a for-profit event, or do you follow the same kind of blueprint?
We follow the same blueprint for the actual planning process. I'd say what's different is that you really need like a champion for the organization to be involved, because that way they can extend their network. They can help to really lead and collaborate on board meetings and committee meetings. And they're bringing their whole networking group in and helping to really sort of send out a message. So I think it's a lot about the organization and some sort of, when I say champion, I mean it could be a co-chair, it could be a lead committee member, it could be an honoree, someone that's really passionate about the organization, and that will sort of change year to year. But that's much more of a collaborative spirit. Myself or any other event producer, organization, and this sort of key sort of lead role. And so that's what's most different. We're following the same steps, but we're really teaming up on the fundraising effort.
That's really interesting, because that's something that I haven't done a lot of event planning or worked with events outside of the nonprofit sector, but that's very similar to what people have told me in the past, that it's very collaborative, and even with local businesses joining in to either help with food or setup or volunteers, but it's I think collaboration seems to be the key for helping nonprofits.
It's true. I mean, it really takes a spirited and devoted team to be able to get the right people to an event and then do the job to make sure that people are extending and helping with the fundraising efforts when they're there.
Yeah. So on that note of fundraising, I guess that's probably a big difference with nonprofit events, is that there is always that sort of cloud hanging over that you need to ask people for money. Right. So have you seen any creative fundraising strategies where maybe you can make that a little more fun and a little less intimidating?
So there's a few different buckets here. Sort of the first step is with tickets and sponsorships. So I would say before you even get to the event, when you're sending out an invitation, you're looking at 2 different groups. Who are your individual ticket holders that are going to pay X number of dollars just to enter the room? And then who are your sponsors, both private and corporate, that are going to write a check to get certain number, like amount of recognition, or be involved at a greater level. And then when you're in the room, it used to be that everyone would either do a live or silent auction. And that was just sort of the way that you would fundraise. And I would say that's still relatively popular. It's still happening. But I know that myself and colleagues and different nonprofits are always looking for ways to be new and innovative and be doing things differently. So I've seen text to give, which is a way that you can quickly text a certain denomination. Sometimes people will have screens in the room so you can see that happening live, and it sort of motivates other people to do the same. Then There's different ways to do raffles, pretty straightforward, but you can also get a little bit, have some fun with that. At a recent event, we did a lockbox raffle. So we were selling keys instead of tickets. And then we would have pedestals with loose-light boxes and great prizes. So you'd have like a chance to, unlock one of the boxes. And then DipJar, now on my radar, is something that I've used with one recent organization and one event a few months back, and we had a tremendous success in working with you guys.
Awesome. Well, that's always good to hear.
Yeah.
I love the lockbox idea. Whenever I'm having a conversation with someone and I'm trying to explain how to be creative and have a little bit of fun, I always bring up the lockbox idea. Selling keys.
So that was something that we did together. It was for an organization called Dress for Success, and this was testing out how DipJar would work. I had experience doing the Lockbox Raffle, so I thought, let's marry the two, because I know that one model works, and let's see sort of how we might get additional income out of the DipJar. And so, as you recall, but our audience is not, we had about 250 to 300 people expected for the event, and we had about that many keys to sell, so essentially raffle tickets. As guests entered, we welcomed them, we gave them like name badges, and then your team and our team together offered these raffle keys. And as we were making that sale, we introduced DipJar, which is basically just the vessel to swipe credit cards and make that transaction super easy and seamless. And it was a 2-second exchange. You swiped your card, you got the key, and then had the opportunity to unlock the box. And the best feedback that we received was just how easy it was to use. No one had to write out a form or talk to another person. It was just like a 2-second grab and go, and people were psyched about it.
Awesome. And you mentioned with Text to Give having a big screen where people can feel involved and see donations happening live. Yep. That's sort of something that we've been working on at DipJar with a product called Dipcast that links to a big screen where you can monitor donations. And I think the basis of that idea was to try and make fundraising more involved.
Yeah.
Instead of it just being, here's $20, thanks, you're on your way. Now the donor actually feels like they're part of something bigger. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on, if you have any ideas or what your thoughts are on trying to make fundraising more interactive, where the donor is actually a part of the process rather than just paying and leaving.
Well, I think what we're both talking about here is something that is not only engaging the audience, but it's motivating the audience. Mm-hmm. So if you can see like a ticker where the dollars are creeping up, or you can actually in conjunction with that, sort of quantify what a certain dollar amount means to an organization. If it's like a youth organization, how many students is $5,000 covering? Or at a school, like how many lunches does $500 cover? But if you can really quantify and give people goals, not only as a collective, but even individual, it's something that I find is a really useful tool.
Awesome. I think the goal is really just to amplify that good feeling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we get a good feeling when we, drop some coins in the cash box or something like that. But if we can actually, as a donor, see, wow, that $20 contributed to feeding 3 dogs for a year, or contributed to giving school supplies to children, that emotional response is really, really strong.
Well, I think this also works the opposite way. If I do my job, then when you have the guests in the room, if you can deliver a message, like you're not just here for a cocktail party, for a drink and a meal, if we can really explain what the organization is about. Now that could be through speeches, that could be through video, it could be done a number of different ways. Then we're really able to move those guests that either already know about the organization, and now we're giving them like a specific story to pull at the heartstrings, or it might be a guest of an individual or corporate sponsor, and now they're learning about an organization that they didn't know about before, and that might prompt, or hopefully prompt and motivate them to give money. And we've sort of then brought it full circle, especially with DipJar, because we make it really easy for them.
That's what we try to do.
Yeah.
So a question just came through from Brad, who asked, what factors help predict what your goal should be for an event? So what plays into whether we have a $5,000, $10,000, $20,000, $100,000 goal?
So that can be a little bit tricky. I would say the factors would be location. If you're in a major city, it would be history. So what has this organization raised in the past? It would be a competitor analysis. What are similar organizations like you doing? And then trying to identify your audience. Like, who are the people that want to get involved and are going to give, and how much might they give, or are they giving to other organizations?
Yeah, that makes sense. I've definitely been to events where people have set a goal of $1,000, raised $1,500 and been super excited, and some people set a goal of $30,000 and raised $20,000 and they're really disappointed. So it's a huge range of possibility.
Absolutely. I mean, I work with one organization. In their first year, they raised $3,000, and last year was their 10th year. Big splashy event, and they raised $1.2 million. So that's like a huge trajectory over 10 years. There's a lot of other organizations that will sort of level out. They might, really know their audience and have a good handle on, what they're able to achieve, and, a few $1,000s additional through something like DipJar might be really exciting for them, because they're only ever counting on X number to raise each year.
Yeah, awesome. And I've seen both sides of this question I'm going to ask happen, and both have been successful in terms of how strong an ask should be at an event. So I've seen events where no one ever directly asks for money, the DipJars are there, and people know it's a fundraiser, but no one asks. And I've been at events where they literally stop everything and they make a speech and they say, all right, guys, it's time to pay up.
Yeah.
So I'd love to know your opinion on if one is better than the other, and if they're the same, then what events would appeal to different?
Well, I would say in general, like, you don't get if you don't ask. So never assume that people know what a DipJar is, or why it's sitting on the table, or what they're supposed to do with it. So it's just a matter of making a soft ask or a hard ask. So an example of a soft ask would be a registration. You'd have them out, and as people were checking in, you would explain what the DipJar is doing there, and how you can use it, and then keep them visible, so that all the guests have opportunities to give, whenever they want, when they check in, throughout the event, as they exit. If I am a fan of a more direct ask, if you have the right person to deliver the message. So it's hard to ask for money. Certainly not an easy thing to do, especially at events that you pay to attend. So, it has to be done by the right person and in the right way. So if you have someone that's motivated to be a part of the organization and can really deliver the message well, and in a strong and direct and quick way, then I'm a fan of that, especially if it's an organization that you can really help, like I mentioned, through videos or through some other content, explain, what they're doing, quantify the dollars, why they need the money, and make sure that people feel good about it.
Yeah, great. I completely agree. The thing that stood out to me then, what you just said, was why we need the money. And I think we've seen a big change in some of the smaller nonprofits we've dealt with in creating a story.
Yeah.
Where instead of saying we need the money for sick dogs, now it's we need the money for Molly, who is this sick dog. It creates a really strong emotional connection. And like you said, if you've got someone who's a great speaker, who's confident and knows everything inside and out, it just makes it more effective.
Right, when you're making it relatable. So that's why, if you're naming the dog and you're telling their story, it's something that pulls at the heartstrings that you can relate to and that you understand.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Ishmael had a great question as well that's just come through, and he said, aside from raffles and lockboxes, what are some other good ways to raise money in a short period of time? So like a couple hours at an event. There's
two ways, to do this quickly and directly, which is the appeal, where you're appealing to the audience. You have a great speaker who is being very direct and asking for guests to, fill out a card or swipe in a DipJar, or a match, which is basically taking the appeal to the next level. Whereas, you will have someone that you already have identified in the room that is willing to match up to X, number of dollars. Let's call it $10,000. So Mr. Smith has offered to match up to $10,000 for what we can collectively raise in the room. And traditionally that has been done with, a card and a pen at everyone's place settings. But a DipJar is like a 10 times easier way to really achieve that same means to the end.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I've definitely seen at events where one event I went to, they had a goal of $10,000 and they were at $8,000. I think towards the end of the night, there was half an hour left. And the host of the event made an announcement, said, if we hit $10,000, then it'll be doubled by this local business. So now everyone's thinking, oh, this $2,000 left to go is actually $12,000.
Right.
And they flew past it in half an hour. They flew right past it. So that's definitely a huge tactic. Now, with events, I've seen a lot of people use ticketing either before the event, but especially with DipJar at the door selling tickets because it's so fast it cuts the line in half. But with ticketing, how would you decide the price of a ticket for an event?
I'd say it's actually pretty similar to what we had discussed for the amount of money that you're going to raise. It's really about, knowing your audience, knowing your competitors, and, having history to know what you have been able to achieve in the past. And so it's tricky. I mean, I've produced fundraisers where the ticket price has been $50 per person and fundraisers where it's been, $5,000 a person. There's a huge, huge range. And I think beyond those factors, it's what you're offering. So is this just a cocktail reception? Is this a seated dinner? Is it a seated dinner and dance on a Saturday night? What are you delivering on?
Right. I think it also probably important to think about who you're trying to target, not just for fundraising, but fundraising events also is a great opportunity to raise awareness. So if you're trying to raise awareness among early 20s to late 20s, then a $5,000 dinner is probably not going to work in 2018. Yeah. But if you're trying to hit the 50s and up range, then they're probably going to find more appeal at a more expensive event, more illustrious. So
exactly.
So before I jump to my next question, Ishmael's jumped into another one. When choosing an event venue, do you aim to get the venue donated and the food donated, or does the nonprofit pay for those and hope that the donations cover that and more?
The nonprofit will pay. I mean, I think there are some venues and caterers or hotels that would discount their prices. I find often that there's a private published price and then there's a different nonprofit rate. Typically that's between 15 and 20% of discount. But, these are still, sites and vendors that are for profit, and they still need to be making their money for all of what they're providing. And I would say, if this is a first-time event, there's more guesswork here. You're definitely taking more of a leap of faith and hoping that you can cover, your basis, and then, of course, turn a profit and exceed. But if not, then you at least have the history of years past, if it's not your first event, to know where your comfort zone is and what you can plan to spend before you start thinking about making money.
I'm sure there's also a correlation between the more you spend, the more you can ask, right?
Yep, absolutely. I mean, it goes back to sort of the type of event and the profile event. If this is a Saturday night event at a top-notch hotel and you have a great band and beautiful ambiance, like, you're charging more. You have to cover your costs and then be making money, but you're trying to appeal to a certain level of clientele. If this is more of like a run or a walk or a sort of basic park event, your costs are lower. You don't have to expect as much to hit your break-even point, and you're looking at volume at that point instead of the caliber of clientele.
Yep. And staying on the ticket train, Amy has come through with another question that they've had a successful event for many years with the same ticket price. Would you recommend raising the price each year, leave it at the same point, leave it alone? What's the way to go there?
So there's no real right way to do it. I would say, over time, it's good to increase the ticket price, because if you feel confident that you can fill the room and you're getting the right people in the room, and you're doing that consistently, then it's time to sort of up level that. Now, I would say there's two things to really consider. The first is, how do you respond to that? So if there's a milestone year, if this is your 5th, anniversary gala or 10th annual, that's something that you can really justify as a reason to be able to do this. The other thing is there something additional that you can offer back? So has this changed format at all? Was it a dinner by the bike, a cocktail reception? Now is it a seated dinner? Are you offering guests anything more? Was it previously more of just a hangout, and now are you offering great entertainment? So what can you deliver? And then you could always test it out. Like what I've done for some nonprofits is have a VIP reception or a high-level sponsored dinner. So those like specific events that were attached to the event, but sort of an add-on, had an additional price, and that was another way to sort of like go around and make and test the higher price, see how many people that you were actually appealing to, and also know that you weren't going to really it wasn't going to be a turn off to your general audience.
Awesome. Hopefully that answers your question, Amy. And you mentioned, we talked about it a little bit before, the Dress for Success event that you did with DipJar. I'd love to talk more about that. If you could go into a little bit more detail about the event itself and then about DipJar's involvement.
So that's a national organization, if everyone's not familiar, but we worked with the Boston chapter, and they had always done a fashion show that did pretty well. They weren't they weren't meeting or exceeding their annual goals, so they had to do a few other events in conjunction with that. So this was my first year involved, and we reformatted. We did the event at the Ritz-Carlton because we wanted to appeal to their higher level audience of corporate and individual sponsors. We put in a little bit more effort and time in the design, and we got some great event partners to donate time and services in exchange for recognition as sponsors as well. And we got a bunch of local celebrities, like people on radio and in media, and a whole sort of array of people to be our models. Bloomingdale's did all the fashion, and we had a great DJ. So when the guests came in and registered, they were told about DipJar, and that had a great placement. We did our Lockbox Raffle. And what we ended up doing was sort of flipping program. We had guests immediately go into the main ballroom and get seated for the fashion show. And the idea behind that was that this was really the meat of the night. And so rather than giving everyone an opportunity to have cocktails and socialize and maybe drop off or not pay attention or take a long time to move into the main room, we did it immediately. So everyone made their way to the main ballroom. They took their seats. And then we had the head of Dress for Success and the ED of the local chapter speak. And they really told the audience about the organization, all the great work they do. We had a video that was very powerful and impactful. And then we did the fashion show because it's certainly, it makes sense with an organization like that dresses women for empowerment, for jobs, and to feel great about themselves. But a fashion show is still a little bit fluffy. So we wanted to make sure that it was a content-rich evening. And so we had our speeches, we had our video, we finished with the fashion show. And afterwards, we brought everyone back out for cocktail reception and food, and we had some sponsor booths. So that was a way for people to really talk about what they saw, to dip their credit card more in the dip jars if they wanted to and were so inclined, and just socialize and end their night sort of on a high.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And do you think DipJar had an effect on the fundraising? Obviously, it's super simple and super fast, and there were a couple of people at the event who said likewise, but I'd like to know from your side of it, did DipJar make it more successful or easier? What did that do?
It didn't change what they raised ahead of time. This is really in-room fundraising. but it absolutely made that much easier. You know, we keep talking about it being simple and easy, but that's the beauty of this. You don't fill out a card. You're not speaking to a few different people. You don't have to follow up after the event. Like, you are literally swiping your card in 2 seconds, and that's it. And there's also privacy measures. So guests really like that and respect that. So I don't have the exact numbers, but it was certainly a few $1,000s at least that was achieved through the DipJar tactics. I think it's also really great for an organization like Dress for Success is that they have a store. And so they keep their DipJars on display. And as people are coming in, volunteers or people dropping off clothes or whatever it is, like, they have the opportunity to dip year round, and people are. So I think it's great for an organization like them, or like a Salvation Army, or you know, somewhere that has a location that guests are coming and interacting, or people on the street year round. And I would say likewise with organizations that have multiple events throughout the year, that's, you know, you're able to really stretch the value of these vessels.
That's great. That ties in with exactly what my next question was going to be, which was, do you think DipJar has a use outside of major events?
Absolutely. Just, I mean, really just that. So I like them, especially when you have event series, but I think, you know, likewise, if you are hosting guests, potential donors, your sponsors, your committee, anywhere, and you're able to be in, you know, face to face with them, to always have the DipJars out. And once they know about it, you don't have to bring it up again. It can just be, you know, on a reception desk as people are coming in and out of an office or a building, but they know what to do at that point. And, you know, if you think about volume and scale, like, it doesn't have to be a high denomination. Even if then at that point they're set to like $15 or $20, that's a pretty easy give for most people, and it adds up.
Definitely. And we touched on it earlier with events and collaborating maybe with local businesses. So I've seen a number of nonprofits who collaborate with a local business at an event, then loan their DipJar to them for the week after the event, and it sits on their counter of whatever shot they have. And, you know, that's
a great idea. There's so many uses of this. I hadn't even thought of that. And I think it's like a no-brainer.
Right. That's foot traffic that you haven't put blood, sweat, and tears into trying to find. It's just going to see your DipJar because you put it there, which I think is awesome.
Totally.
And Karen has come through with a great question. How do you increase your outreach for an event? So above and beyond just the people that receive your newsletter and volunteers.
Well, I think it's about your network. So I'm a big believer in having a co-chair or committee for each event, because that will change year on year. And hopefully these are folks, you know, with a varied networks. And so you're bringing their contacts under the tent or in the room. And then hopefully you've done your job to capture their attention and keep them coming year on year. But then by having a new co-chair and a new group of committee members, then you're constantly evolving each year, bringing more and more people into the fold.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. Well, that's all of the scripted questions that I had down. So give everyone a little bit to see if they can think of another question they want to throw at you. Okay. Don't forget, guys, in chat, if you have a question, fire away. We'll answer it right now. So I'll ask a quick question. Going back to having the screen set up where donors can interact, because this is something that's new to DipJar, and I'd love to get your feedback on it. Do you think it's important to have, so we have an idea where you could put someone's name up on the board. So if you set the DipJars to $100, we have a leaderboard with the latest donor. Do you think nonprofits, that there's a power in naming people? That sounds a little intense, but like that way of acknowledging their donation and saying, hey, thanks, look, John Smith just donated $100, everyone. Or is that a little...
On the organization and on the audience. I mean, some people like the recognition, others just, you know, want to give as a silent donor. So I think we'd have to vet that in advance and just make sure that it was, you know, work for that organization and for the donors. That
makes sense. And Veronica's got a great question. How do you decide what price to put on a DipJar? Which again, I think comes down to the ticket price and everything like that. And how many DipJars would you recommend for an audience of 100 plus?
So I guess I can answer that the same way, that the easiest thing to do is to set the DipJars at different denominations, because then you're giving everyone an opportunity to give. And for an event of 100 plus, I would say 3 would be a great number, because then you've got your opportunity to go low, mid, and high range on what you set your DipJar at.
Yes, and Julie and I were talking about this before the webinar started. It's the Goldilocks Principle, that everyone loves to donate in the middle DipJar. That's the one where people feel the most comfortable. It's not too low, it's not too high, it's just the right amount. And Miriam has asked the question, is there a payment technology or provider for event day tickets and silent auction? I think there's one obvious answer that I can think of off the top of my head, which is DipJar.
Right. Honestly, that's, and I've worked with a lot, that it's the easiest, the cleanest, and what I would recommend now too.
Great. I think that's all the questions I have for Julie today. I want to say a massive thank you to you, Julie, for stopping by and sharing some of your expertise with us. Hopefully all the people that tuned in learned something. I know I definitely learned a thing or two. And a huge thank you to everyone that tuned in as well. Without you guys, there wouldn't be a point in doing these webinars. So hopefully you all learned something and you can go away and put some of this into practice. So Julie, again, thank you so much.